Hello, greetings to everybody. This is Jayashree Mukherjee from iScholar. I am going to take you through what we have in store for all of you in building English communication, to be precise. Let me give you a short background about myself before we get started. I have put in more than a decade of teaching in English language and of course a couple of years in e-learning and instructional designing. So that's where I come from. I hope to give you a wonderful solution to a major problem that we are facing in our country today, that is communicating in English. Let's start now. First thing that strikes all of us is, what is communication? Okay, simple thing. We'll say that right now I'm communicating with you, you're communicating with me. Not really. Okay, communication has to be a two-way process. There has to be a person who is speaking, receiving the messages, and that person sends a message and I receive that. So it has to be a two-way process, not necessarily between two individuals, between a group. And why do we communicate? We communicate to exchange information and ideas. And the most important thing is this: communication is what connects people. We are all talking about today India becoming a global power, okay, the world shrinking, the world coming closer together, and it is so important that we communicate so that we remain connected to people and places. A very important thing is this, that communication is what holds people together and even organizations together. Let's bring it closer to ourselves. A good family is that family, or I would say a happy family is that family that communicates with each other. Similarly, a healthy or a good organization is that organization which communicates, where there is a lot of open communication amongst people. Right? So, this is what communication is all about. It is a two-way process. It cannot be a one-way process. There has to be giving and receiving in communication. There has to be an exchange of information. The catchword here is exchange of information and ideas. It has to connect people, obviously, because when we connect with each other, that is when we communicate with each other and we exchange our ideas. And yes, communication is crucial in holding any particular group, society, or even an organization together. Now, why do we prefer English as a mode of communication? We've got so many languages in our country, correct? We've got a lot of recognized languages and we have a lot of dialects too. But still, why do we prefer English as a mode of communication? Yes, it is a global language of trade and commerce. Whether we like it or not, we have to accept the fact that the British ruled India for, not just India, the entire world for more than 200 years. Right? So, by default, English became a global language and it is the language of trade and commerce. It's a standard for all official communication amongst native language speakers. Just some time back, I told you that we have a variety of languages in our country. Rich languages, no doubt. But then, if you want to link between two different parts of the country, English is the link language. Hindi is also spoken by a large population of people, but still, it is not spoken majorly in South India. In fact, it's not spoken popularly at all in South India. English is spoken more popularly here. So it is a language for all official communication amongst native language speakers. Now, when I talk about native language speakers, I am not only talking about India. Let's place ourselves globally. If I want to communicate about my product or something that I wish to communicate with somebody, say in Germany or in Russia, correct? The mode of communication is automatically in English. And yes, the internet revolution. Internet has changed the world. Today, US or even a remote part in, say, Greenland is just a click away from you. Correct? And this is what internet has done. Internet has brought the entire world close together. And if you want to take advantage of this internet revolution, proficiency in English or no knowledge of English communication becomes a huge advantage. Now, we are all native speakers. English is not our mother tongue, which is a fact. So, we have some challenges when it comes to English language. One of the major challenges that we face is it's an acquired language. Correct? I am from North India. I have acquired this language. So when I speak English, unless I have mastered the art of speaking in a neutral accent, what will happen is somewhere along I will put a Punjabi flavor or a Hindi flavor or a Haryanvi flavor to my English. Same is the case in other parts of the country. A person who speaks in English from Bengal can easily be identified. Why? Because the person adds a Bengali flavor to English language. Same is the case with South India. We have a tendency, we cannot help it. Why? Because it's a foreign language that we have acquired. It's not our mother tongue. So one of the greatest challenges is acquired language. Now why is this a challenge? It's a challenge because if we speak in certain accents, we may not be understood or we may even be misunderstood. Remember, communication is a process in which we speak so that we are understood and we listen so that we can understand. So since that two-way process will not happen if you speak with a regional or any of your native accent. Second thing is this, the basic language structure. The basic language structure of English is different from all Indian languages. The English language has a certain structure of subject, verb and object. Okay? Whereas all our native languages, their structure is subject, object and verb. Right? This is an essential structural difference that we have in our language, due to which we have a lot of issues of acquisition, of getting the language accurate in terms of using the accurate verb. I'll give you a simple example. Ram goes to school. Correct? Now, this is the subject, this is the verb and this is the object. Okay? Now, if I were to write this, let's take the most common language, that is Hindi. It will become Ram school जाता है. Correct? In other words, Ram is the subject, school is the object and here is the verb. All English sentences have this pattern, that is subject, verb and object, and here in all Indian languages the pattern is, you can translate it in fact into your own mother tongue and check. You will see that it is subject, object and verb. Now, what is the issue here? The issue here is this, that when you place the verb between the subject and the object, there is always a confusion. Should the verb agree with the subject or should the verb agree with the object? Especially when we go into passive forms of communication. This problem does not happen when we speak in our mother tongue. So yes, structurally our mother tongue or our Indian languages are way superior. Yes, but then this is the challenge that we have to face when we handle English. So this is what I said, the language structure is a challenge, due to which we have a lot of issues of verb. I am sure you have heard a lot of people say that I went. Okay, the went never happens. It will always become go. The past form is always a challenge here. Correct? Huh? Or they say I did not know this. Correct? The verb form. Right? So these are the issues that we face when we acquire a new language like English. Yeah, we'll have the slide now. And yes, of course, the cultural impact. Whenever we study English, of course now we have a lot of Indian writers also in English, but whenever we study English, what we see is this, that there is a cultural impact. Okay, the culture from which English comes, the sayings, the proverbs, okay, all these proverbs are different. For example, we say in English we have a common proverb, make hay while the sun shines. Correct? Which means when the sun is shining, when everything is so good, make the best of that advantage that comes your way. Now for an Indian, this complete saying is out of context. For an Indian, sunshine or summer is not a very pleasant memory. Correct? So there is always the cultural impact also that we need to keep in mind when we do English language. Okay, some of the challenges that we face, like I told you, the impact of the fact that it's an acquired language, we have an issue of accent. Now, what happens with accent is this, that English is a very, very stress-oriented language. You know, the syllable stress becomes extremely important. I'll take a very common word here as an example. We have this word, content. Now, this can be pronounced in two ways. You can say content or you can say content. Correct? You can say content or you can say content. Both are correct, but they mean different. When you say you are content, it means you are satisfied. And when you say content, we are using it as a noun form. We are using it as the contents on the slide, the contents of the session. Correct? So the meaning changes. Similarly, if you say polish, it is a shoe polish that we have. Again a noun form. But then if we say Polish, we are talking about a person from Poland. Right? So accent is extremely crucial. The way we round our O, the way we round our E, to what extent we bite our V and kiss our W's, you know, watch, when, where, not watch, when, where. It makes a lot of impact on our sounds. The way in which we place our tongue, all these things impact it. So this is one of the challenges of English language. Other, I've already discussed with you, the sentence structure, the essential structure of English language. And yes, the grammar. English grammar, it's not at all like any of our Indian languages grammar. In Indian languages, when we have a grammatical rule, it applies by and far across board. That means it applies throughout. But in English grammar, it's a grammatical structure more of exceptions than of a rule. Correct? So there are, if you have one rule in English grammar, there will be 4 exceptions attached to it. Right? Why? Because it's a language that has been used more than, you know, it's not a language that has been laid on a bedrock of grammatical structure. Right? So English grammar is again one of the challenges that we face. And I've already explained to you the cultural understanding. Right? Now, let's see the natural way in which any one of us acquire a language. A child, for example. How does a child acquire language at home? A newborn baby in the house, right? What does a child do? The child listens to sounds. Correct? And then he begins to imitate the sounds. That means he begins to speak. Then somewhere along he begins to see letters. He develops visual familiarity with words. and he begins to read. And the last stage is writing. This is the process that should ideally be followed to acquire any language. But unfortunately, what happens in India? You all know what happens. We are sent to the school. The first thing we start with is writing. We are told to put those, slant strokes. Then we are taught to write ABCD, a foreign language. After that, they are taught, to read those small stories. Jack went up the hill, Thirsty Crow, all those. Then you are taught to speak. Somewhere along in second or third, you have the poetry recitation, right? You are taught to speak, and listening, unfortunately, sometimes doesn't come at all, unfortunately, in our curriculum. So this is what is actually happening. That is one of the reasons why we find, why we are finding it so difficult to acquire a new language like English. Now, how do we develop proficiency in communicating in English? Remember, we are already from an environment where students have already been taught in a certain way. Correct? They've already developed familiarity in terms of writing a particular language and reading textbooks. The problem is they've not been given enough opportunities to think in the language and to speak in that language. Right? So, how are we going to develop this proficiency? We are going to take advantage of their reading skills, introduce them to reading, then we get them to speak. Use the information that they have gathered over here in reading and translate it to speaking. And then, of course, teach them to listen. We get them into discussions, into group discussions, debates, so that they listen to the other person speaking and then they counter. Writing, I think we do a lot of writing, but then yes, writing with accuracy is extremely important. So the next skill will be writing with accuracy. Writing with accuracy will automatically happen once the person begins to listen and speak in a particular language. What happens when you are listening and speaking in a particular language? You are thinking in that language. And once you begin to think in that language, you will automatically write accurate language, whichever language it is. Even if I want to learn a new language, this is the process that I should follow. Now let's look at each of these skills individually. Listening. What are we going to focus on in listening? In listening, we are going to identify strategies for active listening. We have to get across to the learner the most important difference between hearing and listening. Most of the students who sit in a class, at least I remember when I used to sit in most of my classes, I would hear a lot, maybe not really listen. So we have to teach the learners active strategies, active strategies for active listening. How do you listen actively? There are simple tips for that you need to follow. Of course, a lot of practice. Make a note of relevant information. When you hear somebody speak, there is a lot of information that happens. Why? Because thoughts race in. Even now when I'm talking to you, there are thoughts racing, one on top of the other, tumbling one on top of the other. Now, it's very important that you make a note of the relevant information that is being spoken. Sometimes, I'm sure if you've heard politicians speak, you'll notice that they've spoken for something like 40 minutes and there is no relevant information there. Correct? So it's extremely important to listen, to seek out for relevant information. You must recognize important information there. Okay? You must recognize the important information and learn to skim and scan information mentally. Sometimes when a lot of information is given to you, everything could seem important to you. Okay? When everything seems important to you, you have to prioritize because it is humanly not possible to remember everything. So you decide, okay, from this particular talk, this is the relevant points that I'm going to keep in my mind. Right? How do you do that? You learn to do that by skimming and scanning information mentally. It's a mental processing that is happening. Make inferences to tackle unfamiliar vocabulary. Sometimes what happens is, when you listen, there are new words that will pop up. Okay? Note that word. Try and recall what context has that word been used. And then draw an inference about the meaning of the word. You may not be in a position to clarify the meaning all the time. So you need to make an inference and then go ahead with the meaning that you have decided. Evaluate the speaker's point of view. Okay, the speaker has tried to say something. Don't have your own judgment about it. Okay, don't hold your values on it or your judgments on it. Try and understand. Remember, communication. You want to be understood and you want to understand also. So listen to the other person's point of view and try and appreciate where that point of view comes from, what that person is trying to tell you. Okay? And of course, a very important skill, speaking. Speaking is extremely important because that is the first impression that you make. The first impact that you make on people is with the way in which you speak. Not just the way in which you speak, also the way you carry yourself. You have to speak with a neutral accent so that you are understood very well. You must speak with appropriate intonation and word stress. Now this is extremely important. Intonation and word stress. Okay? English is a stress-timed language and it has a natural music in it. Let me give you a sentence. I did not say that he stole the money. Correct? Let's look at this sentence. I hope it's visible to all of you. Now let's stress each of these words one by one. I. I'm going to say the sentence now by stressing on I. I did not say that he stole the money. That means I did not say. Somebody else said it. Correct? Now, I did not say. Now I'm going to stress on did not. That means I did not say that he stole the money. I never said anything like that at all. It's all nonsense. I never said anything at all like that. Now let's stress on say. I did not say that he stole the money. Maybe I wrote it down. Right? Now let's stress the next word. I did not say, that is of course a conjunction, that he stole the money. I did not say that he stole the money. I said that somebody else stole, not he. Now let me stress on this. I did not say he stole the money. He borrowed it. He did not steal it at all. I did not say he stole the money. Now the last. I did not say he stole the money. He stole the scale. You know, he stole this particular stick. That's what I'm trying to say. He did not steal the money at all. What are you talking about? So this is what I meant when I say that English is a completely stress-timed language. The word that you stress will convey the meaning. Okay? So if you have a wrong stress pattern, you will end up conveying absolutely wrong meanings. Yeah. So we need to speak with the appropriate intonation and word stress. We have to learn to make a presentation. Today the world is all about how you make a presentation. Now when I talk about a presentation, I am not talking about an official presentation. Okay? It could be something as simple as walking up to somebody and suggesting something. It could be something where I walk up to somebody and I want a favor from the person. But how do I present myself? How do I speak? Do I make eye contact while talking? Do I shake, give a proper firm handshake? All these things come into speaking. Okay? So when we train or when we are going to take the learners through spoken skills, we will make sure that the students have the right tone and the appropriate body language along with it to make the necessary impact. It is extremely important today for students to participate in group discussions and debates. If they start young as learners, if they start to participate in group discussions and debates, they will learn to listen and to respond appropriately and politely. We will not replay some of the ugly scenes that we see in the parliament. Right? So we owe it to our learners to teach them to participate in group discussions and debates, be tolerant of another person's point of view, and to project your point of view, public speaking, to project your point of view in a very decent and acceptable manner without hurting another person's sentiments. So these are the things that we will cover in speaking. Reading, well, today we all have so much to read, isn't it? Internet itself is all about reading. How much of information you can read and gather. So it's extremely important that we teach the learners to skim and scan for main idea and specific information. Recognize lexical meanings. That means English is again a language where a certain word is used only in a certain context. So we've got to understand that contextual meaning and use the meaning accordingly. So you've got to recognize the lexical meanings. Recognize patterns in organization of ideas in a text. Everybody has a different way of organizing. It's like a movie that you go to. Haven't you noticed some movies are completely a flashback? You know, it begins with the end, or rather the last scene in the movie, and then they take you right back into the flashback. Correct? Some of the movies have a flashback coming in between. Right? So everything, you have to recognize the pattern in which a certain idea has been organized in a text when you read that. Identify different characteristics of a text. What kind of a material are you reading? Are you reading an autobiography? Are you reading something based on total factual information? Are you reading something that is merely descriptive? You've got to see that. Yes, you have to differentiate between opinion and fact in a text. Especially today when we are overcrowded. I would say we are bombarded with information today. Internet has so much of information out there. It is extremely important that we understand how much of that information we keep with ourselves, how much of it we retain, okay, and how much of it should be taken as an opinion and then used or discarded, and how much of it should be treated as a fact. Not all information you get on the internet is accurate. Please remember that. Do take whatever information you get in the internet with a lot of authentication. You must authenticate whatever you read over there. And of course, the most important skill, actually writing is the toughest part in any language acquisition. Okay? For example, I might be able to speak Hindi very well. But then when it comes to writing, I'll be a little hesitant. Why? Because writing demands a lot of grammatical accuracy. When I speak, I can use fillers like, then, yeah, I can use these kind of fillers. But when I write, I cannot do that. So writing demands a lot of precision and a lot of control in language. So you have to express yourself with grammatical accuracy. Avoid redundancies. We Indians have a tendency to use too many words. We use a lot of redundant language. Okay? In fact, we see it all around us all the time. Isn't it? Don't we use contradictions? Like describe briefly. Okay? Or describe in detail. Right? Description itself means details. Right? So describe in detail. These are all return back. Another common error that we use. Okay? Please return back that gift. Return itself means to give it back. There is no need to use a back along with it. So we have a tendency to use redundancies, run-on sentences. Run-on sentences, too many verbs. You know, we are not able to complete an idea at one point and move on to the next idea. We push one idea into the other. Too many run-on sentences. And of course, we have our typical Indianisms. One of the classic Indianisms I quote is, what is your good name? Why do we say that? We say that because it's a literal translation of the Hindi word, that is Shubh Naam. Aapka Shubh Naam kya hai? Correct? So it's literally translated into what is your good name, as if somebody has a bad name, right? Okay, whenever you get any kind of a thing to write, you must recognize the objective and subjective passages. You should be able to write both an objective passage and a subjective passage. When you write, you must be able to differentiate between the two. And yes, any kind of a writing that we do, when I present a point of view, I should be able to bring in comparisons and I should be able to bring in contrasting features to drive home my point of view. Okay, this is extremely important. I should be able to bring in points of comparison and contrast. Another very important skill that is required today is paraphrase and summarize. Quite often, we all live in a very busy world. We all want to, quickly race through documents. So when you get a fat document, the general reaction is, can you just paraphrase it or summarize it for me? Can you tell me in a nutshell what is it all about? So when you do that, you should be able to capture all the relevant points and then communicate that. Write essays on academic contexts. You have to write. Today, once upon a time in civil services, essay writing had been pushed into the background. They have revived it with a lot of enthusiasm. Right? So today, if you want to write effectively, it is extremely important that you learn how to use comparisons and contrasts, how to avoid redundancies, how to maintain grammatical accuracies, how to organize your thoughts in a logical manner. Right? Now, what do we have to offer you from iScholar? In English communication, what iScholar is going to offer you is live tutoring. You will have people like me come and give you tips on how to improve communication skills, right? We will have contact sessions. We will have our trained teachers come across to you and hold sessions with you so that you people have a one-on-one session along with your teacher. We have created a comprehensive curriculum keeping in mind the various education boards, okay, CBSE, the various state boards, all right, ICSE, all these boards, and we have created a comprehensive curriculum so that we manage to develop the skills, the communication skills of the learners. And yes, we also offer you teacher training. That is, if you want your faculty to be trained in whatever methods we follow, we are always ready to help you out with that. I'm sure you have a lot of questions brimming in your mind, and if you have any such questions, I'll only be too ready to answer it for you. Please contact us through email or any other way, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a wonderful day ahead.